It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Mr. Rogers from Phoenix, Arizona, and the only podcast we listen to in my neighborhood is Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. We'll be speaking with Jeff, and Jeff comes to us from North Carolina, and we're going back well over 40 years ago in the 70s. Jeff is about 13 years old, and he has this very strange encounter. He had recently moved kind of into a rural area, and he had two run-ins with this creature. I'll kind of let him go into it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Jeff to the show. Jeff, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Wes, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know there's a total of 3 encounters we're going to talk about. One of them didn't happen till 40 years later. But if you would, take me back to North Carolina. You're about 13 years old. This is roughly in the 70s. And walk me into this very first incident.
My family, basically my mom, myself, and my brother moved out of Charlotte, North Carolina, which at that time was about 750,000 people, to a small suburb. There was a cow in our backyard when we moved in, so I figured I was really out in the country. We were we were right off a 2-lane highway. We were the 7th house on the left down our street, which was a new extension to that street. There only used to be 6 houses and the street ended. They extended the street about another 6 or 7 houses, and they cleared out all of the woods to add those extra houses. And there were still woods behind all of the houses on the left side of the street, including ours. And those woods went for at least a mile or two. So they didn't clear out all the woods. They just cleared out enough to make the street and to put the houses up under the tree canopy, basically. I used to play with my friends down at the end of the street. At night, we would play under the street light. We would play basketball, ride our bikes, skateboard, just hang out and talk to the cute girls down there. And I was the only one, basically, that would have to come back up the street at night by myself to come home. I always felt uneasy walking the street or running the street. I used to run it because I didn't like doing it by myself all the way back home. It was just a uneasy feeling that I had. It was a moonless night. There was no moon. You could see a million stars since we were out in the country. And since there was very few street lights, there was no really glare to stop you from looking at the Milky Way galaxy or the stars. But once I entered the woods this night, since there was no moon, it was absolutely pitch black. I could not see any trees, any tree limbs in front of me that might, poke me in the eye. I couldn't see what I was maybe running into, where I was. I couldn't even, I had to walk basically as slow as I've ever walked in the woods with just my hands held out in front of me in case I ran into something. I'd been in there for probably 15 or 20 minutes, and normally by then, after maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I'd already be at my house, and I could see our backyard from my mom's porch light that she always left on. But this night, it had already been 20 or maybe even 25 minutes. It just took a long time to make any progress. And I got to the point where I'm thinking, I probably need to go with plan B. And once I see a porch light over on my left, I'll probably, whatever house that is, I'll walk that way and figure out where their driveway is and just hop on their driveway and come out on the street. Well, I took a couple more steps after that thought went through my head, and I hear something over on my left, and it sounds like that leaves are being shuffled around on the ground. This was late October, maybe early November, so there was plenty of leaves on the ground. At first, I just stopped. I was walking so slow, it was easy for me just to stop. And I listened to it, and it sounded like about 15, maybe 20 feet away, and it just sounded like a deer was using one of its front hooves to dig through the leaves, trying to find something to eat. So I slowly took about 4 or 5 more steps, trying to figure out, again, what was in front of me, and trying to be as quiet as possible. And between my steps, I still hear the leaves it sounded like they were being moved out of the way by something. And after about maybe 5 or 10 steps, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my left eye of one of the porch lights on the back of a house about probably 30, 40 yards away. I had about 20 yards of woods to go to before I reached that backyard, whatever house that was. So I took a left-hand turn, took about 5 or 6 more steps towards this porch light, and then I realized where I was. There were 2 houses, about probably 3 houses down from our house, that construction crew had just cleared out the woods in between these 2 houses and made a dirt driveway further back behind their backyard, where they were going to put another house in between these 2 houses, but way in the woods beyond those people's backyards. And since they cleared out the trees and made that dirt driveway, I could see one of the porch lights of one of those houses, and I realized where I was. Once I took a couple, maybe 3 steps on the dirt driveway, it was really soft dirt, like a thick beach sand, so there was no noise I was making. All hell just broke loose. And when I mean that, I heard a tree hitting another tree, and I realized immediately that a tree's falling. And so I just stopped, and I was just kind of shocked. I didn't know what to do. And I turned to face the noise. And again, it's pitch black where I am, and where the noise is pitch black. I can't see anything. I'm looking, trying to figure out what's causing the noise. I know it sounds like a tree hitting other trees on the way to the ground. When it hits the ground, you can hear all of the branches hit the ground and bounce back up, and all the leaves make that noise. You could hear the root ball come out of the ground and dirt flying everywhere. Sounded like a bunch of dirt clods hitting the other trees. And as soon as that sound kind of got quiet again, not totally quiet, I'm hearing 2 big, heavy footsteps coming my way. And I have no idea what it is. I can't see it. I don't know what to do. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm just basically standing there staring into pitch blackness, trying to figure out what's happening. About that time, another tree gets pushed over. The first tree, as I'm looking towards the noise, gets pushed over to my right, and I hear it hitting everything. The second tree gets pushed over. It's going to my left. And at this time, I see in the direction I'm looking, everything's pitch black. But the only thing now that I can see is a bright red circle. I call it a circle. A better, I guess, way to describe it would be a bright red ring with a black center. It's moving and it's coming at me, and there's only one of it. Again, I have no idea what it is. I'm hearing two big, heavy footsteps. You can hear the feet, whatever it's stepping on, the leaves and the branches. You can hear them crunching under each footstep. And this whole time, this red ring, it's bobbing and weaving to the left and the right, and then standing back up again, and then ducking. And again, I'm watching it, and I have no idea what it is, even though I'm hearing two footsteps. I was so scared, I felt like it was useless to run. I didn't think that I could outrun whatever it was, because it was only 15 or 20 feet away from me, it sounded like. And I could hear the footsteps getting closer and closer. I didn't realize that this was probably an eye, and I didn't realize that for decades later till I heard other people discussing their eyewitness accounts of the, I'm not going to even say eye shine, because there was no light back there for it to shine off of, but the self-illumination that some people say they see in Sasquatch. But again, I'm only looking at one of them. And as I hear footsteps coming closer and closer, a third tree gets pushed down. And this one's over to my left again. And it's by this point, I'm thinking I'm already dead. There's no way I can outrun this thing, whatever it is. It's too close to me. After that, the third tree, I hear a couple more footsteps. It sounded like one of the footsteps, like he stepped on one of the trees, or whatever it was, stepped on one of the trees. You could hear the bark kind of crunching, like almost like a 2x4 splintering if you put it into a vise. You could it made that kind of a sound, and then you hear a couple more footsteps on dry leaves and sticks and everything. I'm watching this red circle, whatever it is, come at me closer and closer. And finally, my brain and a voice in my head, it was my own voice, the voice in my head said, "We're running now." And my body just took off down the dirt driveway. I was running faster than I've ever run in my life. Once I came out on the street, I made a right-hand turn to go up to our house, which is about 3 houses up the hill. I ran about 10 or 15 more steps, and I was so scared I thought I was going to have a heart attack. So I decided just to stop and turn around. Now that I had a street light between me and the woods, if it comes out, at least I can see what it is. So I started walking backwards up the street for about 5 or 10 steps, breathing really hard, trying not to even, I mean, I'm breathing so hard, I'm trying not to breathe hard, but there's no way I can stop. So I took I walked up backwards up the street about 10 steps, and finally I'm like, to heck with this. I'm going to chance it again and take off running home. So I turned back around, ran home, came up to our back door. My mom was sitting there, waiting for me to come home. And I think I just walked straight past her and said, "I'm going to bed." Because I had no idea what to say, what to describe. I didn't know what it was. And it scared me half to death. So I just wanted to go to bed. And that was basically the end of that encounter.
It's interesting that you mentioned the eyes glowing, or the one eye. Do you think you were only seeing one side of it as it was going from tree to tree, and that's the reason why you only saw one?
My opinion, like I said, I didn't realize that it was even possibly an eye. I didn't know that Bigfoot or Sasquatch had that ability. Never heard of that. I didn't know they were on the East Coast. Didn't know they were in North Carolina at the end of my street. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know the red ring that I'm looking at could have been an eye of an animal. I had no idea. I have blue eyes, but if you look at my eyes, the blue part of my eye has a black center to it. So the blue is around that black center, and that's what I was looking at. There was a red ring around the black center, and everything else was black in the woods around me and this, whatever it was. And it wasn't until decades later till I started watching Finding Bigfoot show, and just I had I wasn't expecting for anyone to describe what I experienced 20 years ago. And yet there was multiple people describing what they encountered. And at some point they could see it. So they knew what it was, or they figured what it was. And I started like thinking like, oh my God, maybe that's what it was that I encountered in the woods. And then I started researching it or just watching more of those TV shows and realizing, that they are on the East Coast, or they are in the South, or they are in the woods around outside of big cities and at the end of some streets, So I finally put two and two together. And this was, 20 years later. And I'm like, I have no other explanation for what that was coming after me, but it checks, 99% of the boxes of what other people say they've encountered, and they knew what it was. So I'm assuming that's what it was. To answer your question, my personal opinion, and I never realized why I only saw one red ring coming at me until one of the guys, I think on one of the episodes of Finding Bigfoot, he said the creature that he could see had a damaged eye. So it only had one good eye. And I almost fell off the couch when I heard that guy say that. And I was like, holy crap. I'm like, maybe that's what that was. Maybe that was a self-illuminating eye. Maybe it was a Bigfoot, and maybe it had an injured eye, so it only had one good eye.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see it self-illuminating. But again, I've heard that many times. And it is interesting. I've actually had a few people on the show that have come across Sasquatch where it looks like one eye is damaged or it's closed, and it only has one eye it's watching people with. It's rare, but I have heard that before. The second encounter, how much time had passed, and if you would kind of walk me into it.
I think it was the very next fall after that first one. Again, same street, same neighborhood. At the end of that street where the guardrail and the basketball goal was, if you jumped over the guardrail, you're standing in a friend of mine's front yard where his house was way up on the left, and he had a long front yard that came down to the guardrail and woods over to your right. His front yard ended behind the guardrail. There was woods as far as you could. We used to ride bikes and motorcycles through there as far as you can imagine just to get to the neighborhood. We made trails back there. We were playing hide and seek in his front yard. This time it was an extremely bright full moon. Back then, they didn't call it super moons, but this one, I've already looked it up. I think I got the date pinpointed of when it was. If you jumped over that guardrail, crossed his front yard, you would end up where his gravel driveway and his mailbox were. I was hiding right beside the mailbox, beside a tree. My friend Mike, he lived there. He was up on his front porch counting to 100 or whatever he was counting to. Again, it was me, Mike, two of my other friends playing hide and seek in his front yard. And I can see Mike up on his front porch because the porch light's on. He's still counting. Me and my friends are hiding. My two other friends, one of them's in the woods at the end of his front yard beside the guardrail. And another friend was on the side of his yard, probably about 20 feet up beside the guardrail in some tall grass. So three of us are hiding. Mike's on the porch. Mike starts finished counting. He starts walking down the front yard trying to figure out where we are. The full moon is illuminating the whole front yard. It's above Mike, so it's kind of like I'm on the shaded side of the tree. If I walked around the tree to stand on the other side, I'd be in the full moonlight too, so he could easily see me. Once Mike got about halfway down the yard trying to figure out where we were hiding, I hear what sounds like the wind blowing behind me. And what I mean by that, I heard leaves again rustling, but they were at the top of the tree canopy. I could easily tell it was at the top of the trees. I thought it was just the wind blowing the leaves. And I immediately just kind of paid attention to the hairs on the back of my neck and my arms going, I don't feel any wind. The wind isn't blowing, and yet it sounds that way. So I just listened to it for a couple of seconds, watched Mike walk down the yard. I look over my left shoulder to the top of the trees behind me. Nothing's moving. The trees are just dead still. And at this point, I'm starting to get a little spooked. And it may have been because of what happened during the first incident. I never really thought about the first incident. I just tried to bury that and forget that ever happened. So I turn all the way around over my right shoulder, looking at the top of the trees, and almost directly behind me at my 6 o'clock, probably my 5:30 position over my right shoulder blade, I'm looking up at the top of the trees, and I see one tree just going back and forth and hitting the other trees around it. And that's what's making the noise. And I'm looking at it going, okay, I've never seen a tree do that. So I have no idea why it's doing that. And I can't explain it. So I just turned back around to figure out where Mike was and to think about it for a couple of seconds. Mike's about 3/4 of the way down the front yard. So far, everybody's hiding. I'm still tucked up inside the tree branches up against this tree in the shade and trying to figure out this noise. And I can't find an explanation in my brain of why a tree would be doing this. So I turn back around. I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure it out. And the moon was shining, like I said, towards where I was standing and into the woods across the gravel street. It's just a single lane gravel road. It's no wider than a gravel driveway would be. And the moon is shining into the woods on the other side of this single lane gravel street. So I can clearly see 15 to 20 feet in the woods. There's nothing in between me and this tree that where the top of it's just going crazy. So I can clearly see the tree. The moon's shining on it. I could easily see the trunk of the tree all the way up. So I just started at the top of the tree and I said, well, maybe something is chasing a family of raccoons or possums up the tree, and they're running around and around it to the top, and they're just pulling it from side to side, and I'll see them when I'm looking down the tree. I start at the top of the tree, start going down the tree trunk about 1/4 of the way as this tree's still going crazy, hitting the other trees. I don't see anything. I go from halfway down to about 1/4 of the way down. So the only thing left is going to be at the bottom of the tree, and I still don't see anything. At this point, I'm getting really spooked. I have no explanation for what's happening. And I go down about from 1/4 way up the tree down to the ground, and that's when I see it. I'm looking at a white Bigfoot shaking this tree. I have no words for what I'm looking at that time. I didn't know they were on the East Coast. The first one I didn't even know was a Bigfoot or possibly a Bigfoot, so I didn't even think about the first one. This is my first realization that, oh my God, there is a Bigfoot right in front of me, maybe 20, 25 feet away. He's about 15 feet on the other side of this gravel road. The full moon is shining on him and the tree he's holding. And I'm looking at him trying to understand why he's here, why he's doing what he's doing, why he's white, and what I need to do. And it took me, 15 or 20 seconds of staring him up and down. I can see his whole right side from his head to his shoulders, to his waist, to his hips, his legs. I can see everything. There's nothing in between me and him. And the full moon shining on him. And he's got a hold of this tree and he's whipping it as hard. Well, I'm not going to say as hard as he can. He made it look easy. He was standing with his feet side by side, staring at the tree. He had really long shoulder length white hair. The hair was nice enough where you would almost swear it was groomed. It almost looked combed and brushed. That's what I'm looking at, but it's white. But he's shaking the tree and he's pushing it away from him. His hands are right in front of his forehead. And the only thing moving on him is from his elbows to where he has a hold of the tree. So it's just his forearms. He's extending his forearms away from him, stopping it immediately and pulling it back towards him as hard or as fast as he's pushing it away from him. And he stops it right in front of his head before his hands hit him in the forehead. And then he pushes it away from him again. I'm just, I'm waiting for someone to stop shaking the tree, pull the hood off of it or the head off of it and say, gotcha. But I don't see anything that gives it away that someone's pulling a prank on me. I don't know what to do. I don't know what he's doing or why he's doing it. I watched him for probably 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, just standing there trying to figure him out. And he never looked my way. He never looked any other direction other than facing the tree. I couldn't see his face. That was the only thing I couldn't see, because his long hair was hanging down beside his face and kind of in front of his face. But he looked like a 7-foot tall, extremely muscular, V-shaped torso, well-built football player with big shoulder pads, big chest pads, big shoulder blade pads, big thigh pads, and a custom-made tailor white jumpsuit that you put over all of the pads. And of course, I know that's not true, but that's how muscular he was. That's how well-built he was. He had a narrow waist. He had long, nice hair from his shoulders down, all the way down to his feet. He looked like the typical image, a postcard image of the Himalayan Yeti that you would see. It looked like thick fur. And it was layered. Yeah, I could see the fur that came off of his shoulders on the side of his bicep would stop around the middle of his bicep. And then another layer of fur came out from underneath that and stopped around the middle of his forearm. And another layer of fur came out from underneath that and covered up the back of his hand to halfway down his fingers. I could see his fingers grabbing the tree. I'm confused about almost everything that I'm looking at. I came out from the tree that I was hiding from or up against, ran over to where Mike was. Mike was almost out down at the end of the yard by then, so he was pretty close. And in the bright, full moonlight, he saw me coming. I mean, he just stopped and was looking at me like, "What are you doing? This isn't how you play hide and seek." And I could see that look on his face, so I just ran up beside him till I felt more comfortable, turned around and pointed at what I was looking at. And he looked at it, and like I said, the moonlight is shining into the woods, so he saw it. At that point, one of my other friends that was hiding at the end of the front yard in the woods, beside where this creature was, probably about 20 yards away from it, he stood up and he verbally said, "Hey, that's not how you play hide and seek." And he saw me pointing. I didn't even answer any of them. I couldn't talk. I didn't know what to say. I was just kind of like stunned again. And that was my friend David. And finally, he ran over to where we were because I was still pointing. And he stood beside me. Mike was on my left. David's on my right. So now there's 3 of us, and I'm still pointing. And we're all looking at him, still shaking the tree. My third friend, he was on the side of the yard. And by that point, he came running over to see what we were doing or looking at. And I'm pointing, and one of my other friends were pointing. So he sees what we're looking at. So now you got 4 of us standing there side by side in the full moon, looking at this animal shake the tree, and he's still shaking. It's been going on for a minute, maybe a minute and 20 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. He let go of the tree, and he did it in the most unusual way that I've ever seen. He let go of the tree like it was hot. He spread all of his fingers apart as wide as he could get them. He had thumbs. I could see thumbs. It looked just like a human hand. He let go of the tree. He spread his arms out way away from him like he was tracing a rainbow, and then put his arms down by his side. And me and my friends, we're not even speaking. We're just watching. And once he put his arms down beside his side, we're at about his 1 o'clock position at the end of Mike's front yard watching him. And we're probably 20 yards away from him at this point. He turns towards us, his 1 o'clock position, and kind of leans forward like he's going to come our way. When I saw him lean forward, I was already turning to run. And when he leaned forward, the long hair on each side of his face kind of swung down in front of his face again. So now the moonlight is directly in front of him. But when his hair swings in front of his face on both sides, it creates a shadow over his face, so I can't see his face. I was getting ready to run. He kept turning to his right. So when he kept turning, he ended up going out of the woods into even more full moonlight, which to me didn't make sense either. He stepped out onto the gravel road that I was just standing on the other side of, walked across the gravel road very casually. He was covering a lot of ground, but he was in no hurry whatsoever. he was doing it like at a 45-degree angle to go away from us and away from where I was standing. But he was wiggling his fingers still, like his fingers were still hot. There was so much fur over the top of his feet and ankles. I kept trying to look at his feet with every step to see what they looked like. I couldn't see anything but fur. But as he's walking away, I'm looking at him from the left side now. When he turned, after he let go of the tree, I'm looking at him head to toe, from a frontal view. That's where I realized it was a male, because there was very little fur or hair on his chest and on his abs, but you could see the chest muscles. It was not like Patty where she had breasts. This guy, he was a male. He had huge chest muscles and they stuck out so far from his chest. They created a shadow on his rib cage underneath his chest muscles from the moonlight. So I knew it was a male. The skin on the chest and the abs was a flat white. Also, he had white skin. The part on his scalp was white. I wasn't sure if the part on his scalp was white just because the moonlight was shining on it. But I could, while he was wiggling his fingers crossing the road, they were white. What I could see of them, because fur covered over half of them. But his abs and his chest were white. The color of white always reminded me like unpainted sheetrock. Just a flat white, wasn't glossy, wasn't shiny. And one other thing that I noticed during this whole thing, for some reason, he was wet. He wasn't dripping wet, but you could see that he was just recently wet. And all of the white fur on his shoulders, his back, his thighs, his legs, his arms was pulled down into like a point, like a clump where the water had been dripping off of certain points. Once he crossed the gravel road, took him 3 steps at a 45-degree angle. The first step was almost in the middle of the road. Second step was almost off the other side. The third step was in the ditch beside it where all the leaves are blown. And there was a cow pasture. If you take another step, you're going to run into the cow pasture fence right there. But when he stepped into that ditch between the edge of the gravel road and the cow pasture fence, you could tell wherever he stepped that it was deeper than he thought it was going to be, because his leg was already like expecting the ground, and he went another 2 or 3 inches down before he even made contact. And you could tell, if you've ever stepped off a sidewalk not expecting there to be a drop, whenever your foot hits the ground, it just shakes your whole body. I mean, you could see once his foot made contact with the ground that his whole body just kind of shook. So once he stepped in that ditch, he's still facing the cow pasture fence, but he picked up his knee almost as high as his chest, straightened out his right leg from the knee down to the foot, stepped over the cow pasture fence, put his foot down on the ground on the other side of the fence. And I know for a fact, because I've sat on this fence and leaned up against this fence many times playing, it's a 4-foot tall fence. So once he stepped over it, he's got 1 foot on the ground on the other side. The left foot is still in the ditch, 2 or 3 inches below the cow pasture fence in the ditch. And he's straddling it, and he's still tall enough where that he's not even touching the fence. He raises each forearm in succession to clear the fence. He never touches the fence with his hands. He pulled his calf muscle or his calf up behind him, like up against his thigh, and kind of turned his legs to the side, and then straightened out that leg and stepped over the fence, and he just kept going. He never broke stride. He never slowed down. He never touched the fence. And when I saw him bend his leg like that was scary for some reason. That kind of like I just remember thinking it was scary, and I almost ran away at that point. I've never seen a human, be able to bend their leg like that unless you're double jointed, and I'm sure someone probably can. And he just eventually just kept going across the cow pasture. There was a barn at the end of that cow pasture. He just disappeared into the moonlight. Me and my friends were still standing there side by side. We all saw the same thing. Mike at that point said, "I'm going home." And we were all kind of spooked. We all ran up to Mike's front porch. Porch light was on. He just grabbed the door. He goes, "I'm going in." And so he went inside, And just, we never saw him again that night. And the three of us were like, what do you want to do? We kind of looked at each other like, yeah, we're going home too. So we all went home. That was the end of that encounter. We found some evidence the next day.
Yeah, I'm curious about what you guys found the next day. And you guys are just a bunch of kids watching this. Do you think when he was shaking the tree, do you think he didn't notice you guys were there?
That's a good question. And that's one that I've been asked also before. And it never occurred to me that that would have been a possibility. And my gut instinct at the time was he knew I was there. That's why he was shaking the tree. Once I left, he let go of it and walked away. So it makes sense that he knew I was there. And I was so close to that part of the woods, just, on one side of the gravel road to the other, which was what he considered his territory. And there's a lot of other reasons that I haven't told you of why he probably thought it was his territory. No one in our neighborhood or other neighborhoods that played in our street ever went in that section of the woods for some reason. We all got a really weird feeling whenever you would go in that section of the woods. At the end of our street, on our side of the guardrail, you could go as far as you want in the woods and everything seemed normal. You go in that section of the woods in front of Mike's front yard, it just did not feel right. And no one ever went over there. And I even asked one of my friends, why don't we go in this section of the woods? He goes, the guy I asked, he goes, I tried it one time and I made it about 15 steps and I had to turn around and come back because it just didn't feel right. And so I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't say anything. I just said, okay. And about a couple months later, I tried it and I did about the same thing. I made it and I took a couple more steps, tried to push through it, took a couple more steps. I'm like, nope, I can't do this. And I turned around. But that's the section of the woods where he was shaking the tree. And I don't know why I felt that way. But the only reason that I still say I think he knew I was there, because if he didn't know I was there, okay, it's a huge coincidence that he's right behind me shaking the tree when I happen to be there. It's a huge coincidence that he lets go of it and walks away once I run away from where I was. It's a huge coincidence that we were out there together on the same night. Stranger things have happened, I understand. And I also thought about maybe there was an animal up in the tree that he had no idea I was there, and he was trying to shake the animal out of the tree for a meal. But not once. You think if me or one of these animals, one of these creatures is shaking a tree, trying to get an animal out of it, that sooner or later you would look up into the tree to see if it's still up there. Or if you successfully shook it out of the tree, you'd be looking on the ground to figure out where it landed so you could go get it. He never did any of those. So I don't think there was an animal ever in the tree. He was just shaking the tree. And my gut instinct, everything that keeps you alive in dangerous situations, that tells you what to do or what not to do, tells me he knew I was there. It doesn't mean that he actually knew I was there. There's still the possibility that he didn't even see me to begin with. But when he let go of that tree and turned straight towards us, and the moonlight shining on all four of us on our backs and shining on his front, he could have been looking down at the ground. I couldn't see his face, but he kind of, you just got that feeling that he's looking straight at you going, I could come at you, but I'm going to keep going the other way. And of course, none of that's provable. So even if he didn't see us at any time, which would be very strange, he did walk casually enough away from the tree and across the cow pasture fence like he didn't care who saw him. So there is a chance that he never saw us, didn't know we were there. None of us, well, my friend David said that's not how you play hide and seek. So you think he would have heard that voice, but the leaves at the top of the tree were making so much noise when he was shaking. Maybe he didn't even hear David say that. So I'm not going to say that's wrong. It is possible that he never saw any of us. I would say it's highly unlikely. As bright as the moon was, and we're standing out in the middle of the front yard when he turns to face us, I think he would have seen us, but I can't say for sure. As casually as he was walking, to me, that's another indication. Maybe he never saw us, and because either that or he just didn't care. if we could see him. Because when you walk out into the full moonlight and you already know I'm there, and then you see four people standing side by side looking at you, and he still walked out into the full moonlight. Either he didn't care or he didn't know. I guess that would be the only two options you really have.
Yeah, it's very strange behavior. Maybe it was kind of a display he was doing to scare you guys off, and you guys are just a bunch of little kids. And then when you guys don't leave, he decides to leave. I don't know. It's very weird. Tell me, so you went back the next day. What did you guys find?
I went back down to Mike's house the next morning just to make sure we wasn't all dreaming and dreaming the same thing. Mike had already told his brother. So me, Mike, and his brother walked down to the end of the yard. They were at the end of the yard where the guardrail is and the woods start. I'm over there beside the tree where I was standing, trying to find the tree that he was shaking. That's what I want to see, what tree he was shaking. Long story short, I started from where I was hiding, walked across the gravel road, started looking in the leaves to see if I could see where he was walking. I found what looked like one footprint and only one. And I turned around and I'm standing up looking at it. And there's a bunch of leaves in the ditch on this side of the gravel road also. But the leaves at one point looked like they were pressed down, and it kind of looked like a footprint. So I just kind of bent down and stared at it just to let my eyes adjust to it. And after about a couple of seconds, I'm like, oh, I thought it was going up the road. It was actually going down the road towards the guardrail. So I kind of oriented where I was looking. I'm like, you could actually see 5 toe prints. You could see a big toe print where the leaves were pressed down that bent a leaf in half, where his big toe only pressed down on half of the leaf. And even though all of the leaves, wherever they were stepped on, had rebounded some, I guess from the night before. I have no idea when that print was made, but I could definitely see a big toe, 4 other toes, and then I realized the heels down there. And I was kind of squatted down like a catcher would in baseball, with my knees spread apart, and I'm still on the balls of my feet, and my hands are hanging over my knees. And that footprint was as long as my hands would be wide if I hung them over my knees with my knees spread apart. I never measured it, but could it have been a human print? Sure, but it was a human print with someone walking barefoot. I found the tree right after that. I turned around, went to a tree that I thought was it. Didn't see any marks on the tree. Turned around to look again where I was hiding. I'm like, yeah, that might not be the tree. And I went to the next tree beside it. Was a beech tree with really smooth, almost white, bluish gray bark. And I looked up where I figured he would be grabbing it, because I knew how big he was, how big he looked. And I saw 3, I'm going to call them claw marks. I'm just telling you what they look like. They look like 3 claw marks, about the size, about as high up the tree as where it looked like he was grabbing it. And I look up on the other side of the tree, and there's 3 corresponding exact same marks at the same height. And I had to stand on my tiptoes to reach the bottom of the marks with my arms stretched out. And I know how tall I was within a couple of inches at that time frame in my life. So if those were his marks, fingernail marks or claw marks that were right in front of his forehead, then his forehead was somewhere between 7 and 7.5 feet off the ground. And the top of his head would have been a little bit taller. And again, I can't explain why there's only 3. I have no idea. When it looked like he was owning on to the tree, his wrists were bent forward, almost at a 90-degree angle to grab the tree, because the tree is standing straight up. He has his forearms reached out to the tree, and then his wrists are at a 90-degree angle to wrap around the tree. And maybe when he pulled his hands away from it, if he indeed did make these marks on the tree, the claw marks looked like they were pulled down towards him. Like when he let go of the tree was flexing away from him, and he raked his fingernails or claws towards him and ripped the bark off of it like that way. They were not parallel with the ground. They were like pulled down almost at a 45-degree angle towards where he was standing. So I called all my friends, Mike and his brother. I said, hey, come here. See what you guys think. And they looked at it. They're like, holy crap, that's got to be it. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And I turned around to show them where I was hiding, and there was still no obstructions between where I was hiding and this tree. And they're like, that's got to be the tree. And I'm like, I think it is. And I'm like, you guys want to keep walking in the woods, see what we can find? And so they were all like, how guys are. We're not going to say we're afraid. So we're like, yeah, let's go deeper in the woods. Let's keep going. And this is the section of woods where it does not feel normal or safe to keep walking. I don't know why. It just feels weird. But since I was with these two guys and we already found the tree marks and the footprint that I saw, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's worth it. Let's keep going. I get to this section of the woods after probably 50 yards from the gravel driveway where we started deeper into the woods, where it looks like there's a clearing in the woods. There's just absolutely no trees for some reason in the middle of the woods. And I kind of stopped, and Mike's brother on the far end, I look at him, he kind of looked at me. We both kind of stopped at the same time. And as soon as I took my first step into the clearing, the smell hit me. And that's the first, I didn't smell anything the night that it happened, but that smelled like wet dog, decaying flesh. It was the worst smell I've ever smelled. It was way worse than a skunk. But you take one step in this clearing and it hits you, and I just stopped. And I backed up one step. So I'm standing at the edge of the clearing, and you don't smell anything. And as I'm standing when I took that step back, I looked over at Mike's brother. He stepped in and looked at me like, holy crap. And I was like, kind of shook my head like, yeah, you smell it? He shook his head, yeah. And again, we're not talking because we're scared of where we are. But I just looked at him. He looked at me like, okay, we both smell it. There were no tree stumps. Nothing was cut down. It was just no trees. There was two saplings, probably just a couple inches around, one over to my left towards the end of the clearing, and one kind of over to Mike's brother's right over that end of the clearing. The next thing we saw, and me and his brother, and by then Mike was into the clearing also, we all stopped again. Almost right in the middle of the clearing on the ground was a woven stick structure that looked like the shape of an igloo. It had an igloo opening door also, where it was only like 2 feet tall, maybe 2.5 feet tall. It came up to my thigh when I got up next to it. But we all stopped, and when we saw that structure in the middle of it, that was the only thing in the clearing. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know. Again, I'm just, astounded at everything that's going on at this point. I have no idea how you can contain a smell in the open woods to a certain area without the wind blowing it outside of that area. Like I said, you take one step out of the clearing, you don't smell anything. You step into it, the smell hits you. We keep going to the middle of the clearing. The clearing's probably about 20 yards wide, maybe 40 yards long. So Mike's brother's almost at the end. By this time, I'm in it, and I come off of my end of it and step towards the center when I see this structure. I didn't know what it was at first, but when you get close enough, it's a bunch of dark brown tree limbs that have been woven together in the shape of an igloo. My only thought was, it's too small for what I saw to be inside of it. I didn't think about a baby. I didn't think about a smaller one. I was just trying to understand what I'm looking at. I just figured there was something in there. If there is something in there, then we're here at the wrong time and in the wrong place, and it's going to come out and get us. And I walked around to the front about 5 or 10 yards in front of it. So I didn't want to bend down and look inside right in front of it in case something came out. But I bent down and looked inside of it. I was expecting a pair of eyes to blink back at me. I didn't see anything. There was no sound, no movement. I stood up and just kind of shook my head like, yeah, there's nothing in there. And I walked back over to them when we were all trying to figure it out, walking around looking at it. And by then I told Mike and his brother, I said, we need to get out of here. There's probably either something watching us, or there's something that's going to come back and catch us here and not be happy about it at all. And they kind of had that look on their face also. Yeah, let's get the heck out of here, because we didn't know what we were dealing with. Whatever made this structure had hands. What the structure was for, No idea. We got out of there, came back to Mike's house. And again, Mike was scared. He was the youngest of us. He said, I'm going back in. He went back in. Me and his brother sat there and talked for a couple of minutes. My parents got the weekend newspaper Saturday and Sunday. I searched the papers for the next 6 months, every weekend, looking for a white gorilla escaped a local zoo or a traveling circus. Nothing, couldn't find anything. I lived there for 13 years. No one ever mentioned anything like that. So we just kind of kept it to ourselves. And we never talked about it again after that follow-up day. About 40 years later, riding a mountain bike in Uwharrie National Forest, I've been in Uwharrie National Forest over 100 times. It's an hour away from my house. I've almost grown up there hiking, four-wheeling motorcycle trails. Nowadays, I'm mountain biking, I hike out there. I've never had anything unusual happen. This third encounter 40 years later was right around 2017, 2018. I'm on a weekday while everyone else is mountain biking through the normal trails that I ride. I'm the only car in the parking lot. There's no other bikers out there. It's a Monday morning. I like being out there by myself. There's no park rangers vehicles. There's nothing. I got 50,000 acres to myself, or so I thought. I'm about halfway down the first trail, which is the deepest trail into the woods. It's about 3 miles into the woods from where you pull off the road. I'm pedaling up very slowly, probably walking speed, one of the steep hills that you have to climb, and a rock lands right beside my foot. And I'm just staring down at the ground as this happening because I'm tired of climbing. I'm out of breath. I've been hustling down the trail the whole time. So I'm just looking down, trying to catch my breath and go as slow as I can go up this hill until I get over this hill. And then I'll go down the fast section on the other side of the hill. But I got my eyes open and I'm pedaling really slow and I see a rock land right beside my foot. I didn't jump to the conclusion, oh, it's got to be a Bigfoot. It's either a homeless person or there's something on the side of the trail throwing a rock at me. I even thought about a crow. Maybe they like shiny things. Maybe a crow picked up a piece of quartz, which is what this was, and dropped it right beside me as it was flying overhead just out of coincidence. But I need to keep pedaling and get out of here. And I can't go fast because I'm still climbing up this steep climb. So I make about another 3 or 4 pedals. I hear a loud knock. It wasn't a wood knock. I heard a loud bump up against the tree on my right-hand side, kind of over my right-hand shoulder, like my 4 o'clock position. And by then, my sensors are on high alert. With what I've already dealt with 40 years prior, I immediately turned to look at that specific point where I thought the sound came from. And I was surprised that I actually saw another white rock that had hit a tree limb on its way to me and bounced up straight up in the air, and it was still spinning above that tree limb. I saw it spinning, and it fall and hit the ground. And I'm like, okay, whatever is here is either fast enough to run behind me and get on that side of the trail and throw another rock, or there's more than one. And if there's more than one, then I'm starting to feel surrounded. Whether it's homeless people living in the woods, why would they throw rocks at me? If it's a Sasquatch, again, I don't understand why you throw rocks at me. If you're trying to be an elusive, secretive creature, why would you give away your position of where you are? I know now there's something beside me throwing rocks at me. All they had to do was just stay quiet, stay where they were, and I would have pedaled out of the way in less than a minute or two. But when the second rock hit the tree limb, I said, okay, as soon as I can, I need to stand up, start pedaling, and get out of here because I don't know what it is. And right when I made that thought, the loudest sound you've ever heard imaginable that you could imagine in the woods happened. And it 100% sounded like wood hitting wood. I, to this day, have no idea how any human or any animal could hit a piece of wood with another piece of wood and make it sound that loud. I have a Glock 45 caliber that I fired at arm's length without any hearing protection on. I know how loud that gun is. This was louder than that. This sounded like a a cannon off of a Spanish galleon going off right beside the trail where I was pedaling up the hill. I instinctively ducked. I mean, I'm holding on to the handlebars. I just ducked my head in between my shoulders, thinking a bullet or a cannonball was going to go whizzing right past my head the next second. But it was just so loud and it scared me that, like I said, I ducked and I told myself again, just keep pedaling, just get out of here. And about 30, 45 seconds later, I got almost crested the hill where I could actually stand up and make some progress. And I just stood up and started pedaling as hard as I could and got out of there. And I never heard anything else or saw anything else.
I wonder if what you heard wasn't a wood knock. It was actually a live branch being broken. Because when that snap sound happens, it kind of sounds like a gunshot going off.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But I would put my hand on a stack of Bibles and say, yep, it was 100% sounded like wood hitting wood. But I have no idea how you could make anything sound that loud in the woods. That's the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life in the woods. And like I said, it was right off the trail. My thought process after that was, let's just get out of here. Let's just finish the ride, get back to the car. And when I got back to the car, I'm still the only car in the parking lot. There's no one else there. I don't think it was people. But, I didn't see any visuals that time, but it was just the two rocks being thrown at me and that loud noise.
Sometimes it's almost worse when you don't see it. You're having rocks thrown at you, but you can't tell where they're coming from. But I appreciate sharing it. And I appreciate sharing the encounter when you were in your youth. I wanted to ask you, what do you think Sasquatch is? What's kind of your take?
Just my experience. With the one I could see is what I'm basing most of this off of. The white one. I'm going to say it's a primate, just an unknown primate. And is it a Gigantopithecus or what's the other one? The Paranthropus, if I'm pronouncing it right. I have no idea what it is. What I've seen, the way the white one walked, the way he was built, the muscles. If I could have seen his face, I would give you a lot better answer. What I'm basing my opinion on what they are is the white one that I could clearly see from the right side, the front side, the left side, and as he walked away, the back side looked like a really big, not gorilla, but a really big primate.
Yeah, I can understand why you would say that. They definitely have the appearance of a primate, and a lot of their behavior is very much like a primate, shaking trees, throwing rocks. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share the encounter with us. I really enjoyed chatting with you, Jeff.
No, I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I'm hoping, just like I've only really talked to you and maybe two other people that know the subject. I still have so many unanswered questions about what happened, why it happened, and why they were doing